Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm back with my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read last week, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a good week, and I think made better because I just admitted defeat on a couple books, DNF'd them, and moved forward, and that gave me more space to try some new things. So I'll talk about that, but let's start with what I did finish. The first one that I finished was a book that I just recently got from NetGalley. And I've been on kind of a NetGalley binge lately. I finally decided that I was gonna deal with with NetGalley. I had a lot of backup books in there, And I just determined that I was just going to take the hit and just admit the ones that I wasn't going to read. Because there were some that I had started and I was like, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not in the mood. I'll come back to it. And realistically, I never went back to them, and I didn't think I would. So when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, in normal cases, if I was in real life, and this wasn't something that was gifted by a publisher, if I started to read something and didn't like it, I would DNF it and I wouldn't go back to it. So why am I putting different parameters on this? So with that thinking, I then went in and said, okay, I'll take the hit in my completed ratio, and which means that it would be a while before I got new books. And so I went in girding myself for that reality, but in fact, it didn't affect my numbers at all. If I only had known this earlier. So I dumped a ton of stuff that just wasn't for me, wasn't going to work for me, I wasn't going to read. And then that helped to kind of bubble up my enthusiasm again, and I got a few NetGalleys that I really wanted. This was one of them. This is A Certain Darkness. This is The Very Decant number 6 by Anna Lee Hoover. I've talked before about this series, how much I like it. It's kind of like a mystery slash spy espionage type of series. We have Very Decant, who was working as a spy during the war for the British, and she's just very smart. She's just very astute, very aware of things, and she is married to Sidney, who was in the army, and he was at war. They've reunited after the war, and they're kind of trying to get their marriage back on track. After the war, he was still missing for a significant amount of time. And it turns out that he was trying to solve his own mystery. And this happened in previous books in the series. And so he didn't immediately come home. And that created a big rift between them because he didn't want to talk a lot about what had happened then. She also had started to develop some feelings for somebody. And that became an issue for him, as you can imagine. So, they're trying to get back together, and they're doing a great job. Well, at the start of this book, we have the French government calling Sidney because they need his help. The French police have apprehended a woman that they are calling a spy, that they are saying is a spy, but she will not speak to the authorities. She'll only speak to Sidney. So, and the biggest challenge is that woman posed as his wife during that time that he was missing. So all of a sudden, as they're just starting to reform their marriage and really starting to find their way with each other, this kind of comes in sideways. Well, he creates an agreement that he'll only go if he can bring Verity. And the reason he wants to bring her is because she's so smart. And as a former spy, she sees things that he won't. And so they go, and that kind of pulls them into actually a few different mysteries that all spin out from that occurrence. And it's just so compelling. Her writing is really good. I love where she takes the story. Now, I will say one caveat here is that I think the big reveal that they had for this one was a little too much. It went too far into the realm of conspiracy for me. But, if I take it as fiction, it did allow them to have a conversation and to have them question some things about their fidelity to and what they've been willing to sacrifice in the war for their country. So that had an interesting resolution, even though the pivotal moment, I think, stretched credulity. So you'll have to tell me, reach out if you've read it and you know what I'm talking about. But that aside, I love this series. I think if you are a fan of like the Maisie Dobbs series, this is a slam dunk. Absolutely. You will, I can imagine you will not like this one. This is the 6th one. It's coming out very soon. I'll put the date below. And if you've been reading the series, it's a must do for sure. The next book, really interesting. This also was a NetGalley, but I had put in the request for NetGalley at the same time that I ordered the book. Same time I had ordered the book, and I didn't think I would get the NetGalley, but I actually did. But here is the book. It is Light Perpetual. This is by Francis Spufford. Now, I loved Golden Hill. That was his debut, and it was just mind-blowing, the detail and the atmosphere, and almost Proustian. Like, he will put you in a moment and give you the surroundings and the minutia that really help it come to life. And I thought he did a magnificent job in Golden Hill. This was a little different. So what do I want to say about it? I think the writing still had those same elements that I really liked. The detail, the vibes, the feel of what was going on in these moments. But the overall premise of the book just didn't work for me. So this is kind of like a what would happen if kind of story. So we open with it's 1944, and a bomb is dropped, German bomb panwers in Woolworths. And this is as Woolworth is doing some kind of like new release of this potware. And so all of these people are there, like it's completely packed. And these 5 children die. And they were all kind of in the same grade level. And what he goes on to posit is what their lives could have been moving forward if they hadn't have died. And with a setup like that, unfortunately, it put it in my head that how is he going to wrap this up? Where is this going? How is he going to refer back to this event? And that became a knit that I couldn't solve. And I had to let it go. And once I let that go, I enjoyed it a little bit more. But instead of a what if, it really was like, why do it that way? What he does is he checks in on what the progression of the lives of these 5 children would have been were it not for that bombing. And he does so at one day. It's the same day across 15-year span. So we have these massive jumps. And he does like the jump really well. He does the backstory really well, where you get caught up quickly, and then you're recentered and refocused in this character's life. But there's a little too many characters. There's 5 of them. And then you have got the jumps, and then you've got the what if, right? And so you see where I'm going. Like there's a lot of structure that didn't need to be there to prop up what is otherwise an interesting story about these children who grow up through the UK during interesting times in UK history. And I think he's able to get some emotions out of you because you're following these people. I like that this is not like, these are not perfect people. There are some really creepy, scary things that happen that these people do or are a part of or witness in their lives. Yeah, the writing, again, I like his style. I like the detail. I like the way he phrases things, but it was a little too much. I gave it, I think on Goodreads, I gave it a 3, and I think that's fair, because there's enough here that I liked. I just wish that it wasn't held to this rigidness, and it was just organized differently. Right. That's ultimately, I know this has been out for a little while, so I would love to know if you've read it. What did you think? So there you go with that one. Those are the only 2 that I actually finished. Let's talk about my DNFs. So the first DNF is one that came after a conversation with my very good friend Leo from Leo's Little Book Life. He's on Instagram. I'll put a link to his IG handle there. So Leo was reading something that I recommended to him because he loves Dickens so much, right? And so this book, The Quincunx, which I loved. It's like a puzzle. It's like a mystery, but set in a Dickensian world. And it's really complex. And there's all of these things that are afoot and at play. But because it was set in a Dickensian world, he could not help thinking like Dickens would have done it better. And that comparison he couldn't get past. Well, I heard him in my head as I was reading this. And I was doing this for Janeaustenjuly. I was reading Northanger Abbey by Val McDermid. And this is meant to be an homage and a sequel, or not a sequel, a modern day interpretation of, right? So, it's doing its job. I had just gotten done reading Northanger Abbey, and I think the proximity to it was just too great. I don't think it works for me to read this so close to what is obviously a masterpiece or a work of tremendous classic predominance, I guess, let's say that. Because this is light and frothy, and it was fun, but it's just not the right time. I was like, there are other books I want to read, and I'm only doing this to fulfill a prompt in Janeaustenjuly, so I think I'm going to stop. And I did. So, it's not a bad book. It's just the proximity to, again, not what I wanted. And then this, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So last time I talked to you, Tristram, Shandy, I had been reading this with the delightful, brilliant, so clever, so funny, warm, generous, gracious Roz of Scaldandling about the books. And we were reading this together, and I had to confess and just tell her that I didn't know what I was reading. It wasn't compelling. I wasn't liking it. And she was like, "Oh God, let's just stop. Just don't do it." But I'm stubborn. And so I tried to keep going even after she freed me of our buddy read and said, call it what it is. And I get it. Well, I didn't. I kept going, and I was it was like running in sand, I wasn't enjoying it. And so then I said again, why? And so I went and I did like one of those like wiki reads of like, what is the relevance? What's the summation, all of that. And I realized, I'm okay with letting it go. So bye-bye. Bye-bye, Tristram Shandy. Interesting. It was an interesting book. I get the how bizarre, how wild it must have been when it came on the scene because of the formatting, because of where he takes it, what he does with it. But no, thank you. I don't need to spend more time to greater that appreciation. I already have it. It's all good. So that gave me space and time to read some books that I'm absolutely obsessed with right now. Let me show you the first one. Oh my God, this one is amazing. It's amazing. This is Let the Record Show, A Political History of Act Up New York, 1987 to 1993 by Sarah Schulman. Let me show you that. This is phenomenal. I think, I struggle as a nonfiction reader. I read very slowly if it's nonfiction. This, I'm eating it up. Despite the fact that it's tremendously powerful. rich with insight, rich with data. It's a story. So Sarah Schulman was a member of ACT UP, and so she's really, one of the key things she says in the early piece, which was so interesting. She said that she realized that they needed to get this out. They needed a document of what actually happened, because people in doing research of the times were going to New York Times articles, which were biased, which weren't correct, which were not really capturing the moment as it was. I'm reading this as part of a group read that Sean from Past Story Time, I'll put a link to her channel below, is leading. And Sean recognized that one too. And we were both like, whoa, it was, good honor, because this is a huge amount of work. And what she's doing, she's so expertly kind of putting individual people and interviewing them and getting their stories, but contextualizing it and wrapping it into different sections of how they were organized, what were some of the major direct action that they took, why did they take them, how did they set up for them, what were the after effects of these things. It's remarkable. I'm so glad we have a good amount of time. I think we're reading this in 5 weeks, so it's not something we're rushing through. We have enough time to read it. It's so inspiring. It's fascinating. As you can tell, I'm deeply in love with this, and I can't imagine it not actually getting better as we go in and learn how to read it, how she's phrasing it, and then read more stories. Just phenomenal. And then I'm reading my first Nancy Mitford biography. So she did biographies. Who knew? This is The Sun King, and this is by Louis XIV and Versailles and his court and who he had around him and all of that. And, she's really smart, very accomplished. And it is very readable, but it's a heightened reading experience. It's not as playful as her fiction, but you do get a sense of her whimsy, even though you could tell that this is well researched. She knows what she's talking about, and she's a fan. She's definitely a Francophile. So I'm slowly reading this. I think I'm about, maybe a third of the way through. So having fun here. And it's easy to dip in and out. Then next, I'm reading this book. This is The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. Great cover, right? And I'm reading this with Eric Carl Anderson. And we just started it this weekend. And her writing is amazing. Amazing. Sparse. Very direct. Very controlled. Atmospheric, like she sets the scene, she sets the context, but she doesn't spoon feed you anything. But she'll set a scene, you get a tone and a vibe in the scene, and then all of a sudden one sentence, one line will change everything and reorient you all of a sudden super fast, and you have to kind of adjust. I'm spellbound by it. I'm only up to chapter 8 right now. But I'm actually in awe of what she's able to do. And I don't have a lot of tabs because the sentences are fantastic. The writing's fantastic, but it's more about her control that in setting the scene, setting the pace, that is remarkable. And the characters are so interesting. There's a lot of menace. There's a lot of sadness, and also like whimsy. We open this book with Kathleen and her mother waking up, and they're in the same bed. And she wakes up in anxiety, and her first instinct is that her father didn't come home. And so for me, I spent the first little bit thinking that they're worried about him. Is he okay? Has he been hurt? Should they go looking for him? But it's not that. It's that the father is a very belligerent and bad alcoholic and very violent when he drinks. And so the menace is that he could come home at any time. And what would they do? But it took a while for me to get that. And so it's a normal morning. She's getting ready for school, but she has anxiety and she's worried. And again, I'm still thinking that, is he okay? And as she's walking to school, walking over the hill, she keeps looking back and she's kind of looking over her shoulder. And she said, if I'm not there and he comes home, he'll kill her. And that was the sense. And that's what I mean by setting a scene, giving you an instinct that it's going in one direction and then flipping you around. So there's a cast of characters starting to build. Again, I'm just a tiny way into it, but I'm already enchanted. Really looking forward to reading more and maybe even finishing it this week. So that's what I have on the go right now. For my to be read pile, I have made mention before that my In Real Life Book Club friends are traveling right now. They'll be home soon. So I need to read The Promise because that's something that we are going to be talking about in our next book club meeting. So I need to get on this. Then this one is really speaking to me. And not just because the cover is so interesting. This is one that I saw when I was in London, but I had already bought so many books. So that I could not possibly buy another one and fit in my luggage. But when I had to buy books for the BookTube prize, I'll be ranking those and sending my ballot in this week. I needed to buy a few. I couldn't find them locally. So I put an order in Blackwells and this just happened to appear in the pile. This is The Flames and it's by Sonja Haydock. This is set in Vienna in the 1900s, and it is about Egon Schiele's muses. So sounds great. The cover looks fantastic. So that's exciting me. And I guess that's enough. That's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I would love to know, have you read any of these? Are you reading any of these? Would you read any of these? And do you have any recommendations similar to things like this? I hope you have a great reading week ahead of you. And thank you so much for watching. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.